It has been 10 months since Air India Flight 171 fell out of the sky 32 seconds after takeoff over Ahmedabad. 260 people died. It remains the deadliest aviation disaster of this decade. 5 days after the preliminary report was released, the Wall Street Journal published a story suggesting what nobody in the official investigation was willing to say outright, that Captain Sumit Sabharwal had done it on purpose. Within days, a 56-year-old pilot who could not defend himself because he was dead had been convicted by half the world. But one man was not buying it. His father, a former officer of India's own civil aviation regulator, has spent 10 months filing petitions in the Supreme Court to clear his son's name. And in 2026, after a second Boeing 787 did something at London Heathrow that should have stopped the entire narrative in its tracks, and after an independent forensic analysis of the final seconds of the flight appeared to contradict the official sequence, more people are starting to ask whether the story we have all been told is the wrong one. Before we get into what changed, we need to go back to the day it happened. Act 1. The flight, 1 minute to 4 minutes. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport sits on the northern edge of Ahmedabad. On June 12, 2025, weather was clear, temperature around 38 degrees Celsius. Air India Flight 171 was scheduled to depart at 1:38 in the afternoon on a routine service to London Gatwick. The aircraft was a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner, 12 years old, delivered new to Air India in January 2014. Full flight, 230 passengers, 12 crew. In the cockpit, Captain Sumit Sabharwal, 56, over 15,600 flight hours, nearly 8,600 of them on the 787. A line training captain, the kind trusted to train other pilots. His last Class 1 medical exam, the highest certification in aviation, was taken September 5, 2024. He passed cleanly. First Officer Clive Kunda, 32, around 3,400 flight hours. He was flying the aircraft. Sabharwal was monitoring. Takeoff clearance came at 1:37. The takeoff roll lasted 62 seconds. The aircraft rotated at 155 knots and lifted off at 13:38 and 39 seconds. 3 seconds later, at maximum recorded airspeed of 180 knots, both fuel control switches moved from run to cutoff, 1 second apart. Both engines stopped producing thrust. The aircraft was at roughly 625 feet. 2 seconds later, the ram air turbine deployed, the emergency propeller that drops from the belly of a 787 when it has lost nearly all engine and electrical power. The cockpit voice recorder captured the exchange. One pilot asked why the other had cut off the fuel. The other said he had not. Neither knew what was happening. There was a partial relight on one engine. It was not enough. 32 seconds after liftoff, the aircraft struck the BJ Medical College hostel, a mile and a half from the runway. 241 of 242 on board were killed. 19 on the ground died. One person walked out. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh survived because the section of fuselage containing row 11 tore free on impact and came to rest in a gap beside the wreckage. He has said the cabin lights flickered before the impact, before the engines lost power, before anything else happened. Hold that detail. We will return to it. Act 2. The preliminary report and the leak. On July the 12th, 2025, the AAIB published its 15-page preliminary report, required under Annex 13 of the ICAO Convention, meant only to establish facts, not assign blame. It confirmed the switch sequence, the cockpit exchange, no birds, no fuel contamination, clean maintenance records. And it noted something else, a document the US Federal Aviation Administration had issued 7 years earlier. On December the 17th, 2018, the US Federal Aviation Administration issued Special Airworthiness Information Bulletin, NM 1833, a non-mandatory alert. Operators of Boeing 737 aircraft had reported finding fuel control switches installed with their internal locking mechanism disengaged. The bulletin recommended inspection. It was voluntary. Some carriers complied. Air India, according to its own submissions, never performed the inspection on the part number installed on VTANB, the exact aircraft that operated Flight 171. 5 days after the preliminary report, the Wall Street Journal published its story citing former NTSB officials who suggested the cockpit recording indicated the captain had moved the switches. Within hours, British tabloids added unverified claims about Sabharwal's medical history, including a former period of leave and second-hand accounts of depression from unnamed colleagues. The preliminary report itself had already stated his medical records were reviewed and nothing noteworthy was found. On July 19th, NTSB Chair Jennifer Homendy issued a public statement calling the coverage premature and speculative, urging the public to wait for the AAIB's official findings. The Indian Aviation Ministry issued its own appeal against selective reporting. The Federation of Indian Pilots called the framing reckless. None of it changed the story that had already taken hold internationally. Act 3. The Father and the Court, from 7 minutes to 9 minutes 30 seconds. Pushkaraj Sabharwal spent his career as an officer of India's Directorate General of Civil Aviation. In August 2025, AAIB officials visited him at his home, and according to his own account, the framing of their questions made clear they believed his son had cut the fuel supply. On August 29th, he wrote a formal letter to the Secretary of Civil Aviation and the AAIB Director General, calling the preliminary findings deficient and diversionary, and demanding a judicial-style inquiry under Rule 12 of India's 2017 Accident Investigation Rules. The letter received no substantive response. In mid-October, he filed a writ petition in India's Supreme Court. On November 7, 2025, the bench of Justices Surya Kant and Joymalia Bagchi heard the petition. This received minimal international coverage, but on the official record, the court stated that no report had assigned responsibility to the cockpit crew. The Justice Surya Kant told the Pilots' Council, "No one in India believes the pilot is to blame," and that the court described selective leaks from the investigation as unfortunate, warning they could unfairly stigmatize the families of deceased crew. Notices were issued to the central government, the DGCA, and the AAIB. Weeks later, in November, the Wall Street Journal escalated its reporting again, citing American officials and industry sources who believed the crash was intentional. The narrative did not change. Act 4. Heathrow and the sequence that contradicts. On January 17th, 2019, All Nippon Airways Flight 985, a Boeing 787, landed at Osaka. As the crew pulled the thrust levers back and deployed reversers, both fuel control switches moved from run to cut-off by themselves. Both engines shut down on the runway. Nobody was hurt. Investigators concluded the aircraft's Thrust Control Malfunction Accommodation System, TCMA, misread the air-to-ground transition and interpreted normal reverser deployment as a runaway thrust event, commanding fuel cut-off without any pilot input. In the months after the Ahmedabad crash, FIP President Captain C.S. Randhawa argued publicly that Osaka was the template, that the 787's electrical architecture, combined with documented water ingress into electronics bays, could produce the same failure in flight. On February 1st, 2026, Air India Flight 132, a sister 787, was preparing to depart Heathrow for Bangalore. During pre-flight checks, the left fuel control switch slipped from run to cut-off on its own, twice, before finally holding on the third attempt. The crew filed a defect report immediately. Air India grounded the aircraft. Boeing was notified. The UK Civil Aviation Authority expressed serious concern that the aircraft had been allowed to depart at all. 11 days later, Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera published a story claiming the final AAIB report would conclude the crash was almost certainly intentional, framing India's official silence as a calculated decision to protect trade interests. This is a media claim citing unnamed sources, not an official AIB conclusion. The Federation of Indian Pilots called for action against the paper. In early April, the Safety Matters Foundation of India released a photogrammetric analysis of airport security footage from the crash. Their conclusion was that the RAM air turbine deployed 2.5 seconds before the fuel switches transitioned to cutoff, not after. If switch movement caused engine failure, The RAT should deploy after the switches move. Their analysis found the opposite order, meaning whatever killed the engines may have begun before any human hand touched anything. This is not an AAIB confirmed finding, it is an independent analysis. But combined with Ramesh's account of cabin lights flickering before the engines failed, two separate methods point toward the same possibility: an electrical event, not a human hand. Boeing's pattern is documented history, not speculation. The 737 MAX crashes in 2018 and 2019 killed 346 people because of an undisclosed software system, after which pilot error was the first public explanation floated. The door plug blowout in 2024 exposed missing bolts and gaps in Boeing's own manufacturing records. Two Boeing whistleblowers died within 8 weeks of each other in 2024, both having raised safety concerns, both deaths ruled unconnected. In January 2026, the Foundation for Aviation Safety submitted evidence to a US Senate subcommittee, documenting years of reported electrical issues on VT-ANB specifically: short circuits, overheating, at least one prior in-flight fire, alleging Boeing's response had been insufficient. The final AAIB report is expected before the one-year anniversary. A 91-year-old man is still waiting for it to clear his son's name. 260 families are still waiting for it to mean something. Subscribe. When it drops, we cover every word.